Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Wake Up with Ashland. My name is Cameron Walpole. I'm the Manager of Tours and Education here at Ashland, the Henry Clay Estate. Wake Up with Ashland is sponsored by Dupree Mutual Funds. We thank Dupree for allowing us to host these weekly field trips and interviews and conversations that we're having. Today, we have a really special guest who looks very familiar to you if you've been watching Wake Up with Ashland. It's our own curator, Eric Brooks. So Eric and I are actually going to be in conversation today, and I'm going to be interviewing him about what it's like to be a curator. A curator is, I don't know, I think a lot of people would love to be a curator. It's one of those kind of dream jobs. So Eric is going to be telling us a little bit about what it actually means to be a curator. So Eric, welcome.
Thanks.
Kind of odd welcoming you since we're you're here every other week anyway. But I wanted to hear a little bit about what it's like to be a curator, because a lot of people think that if you work in a museum, you're a curator. But actually, there are a lot of different roles, and a curator is a very distinct role within a museum. So could you tell us just a little bit about what it means to be a curator?
Sure. And that question is an interesting question. It's a little bit complicated in that it means different things at different places. So what does it mean for me to be a curator? Hold on a second. There, my phone's not going to go off. Is different than what it would mean for a curator, say, at the Met. So generally, the word curator comes from the Latin word curabus, to take care of. So curators take care of things. They collect things. At a place like the Met, a curator is going to be a subject specialist. So there's someone who is expected to know all about a certain kind of thing. So, for example, if I were a curator in the Egyptian department, I would be expected to know about Egyptian antiquities. For me, it's not just that. I mean, that's certainly part of it, but it's also managing the collection, taking care of the collection, accessioning artifacts, cataloging artifacts, managing conservation when it comes up. So I'm covering a lot of roles that in some places are divided up. But traditionally, the curators are the people that manage the stuff. And by definition, the most fundamental defining characteristic of a museum is that it has stuff. It collects stuff. That is the single most sort of critical part of what a museum is. There are other parts of the definition, but that really sets it apart from other types of institutions. So people who are curators care for the stuff and know about the stuff. There are a lot of other terms that can be used to refer to those people, collections managers, preparators, registrars, and so on, conservators. But curator is a catch-all that covers a lot of that. I use it because, to my mind, it is the most comprehensive term for all of the things that I do. Whereas at a place like the Met, only certain people would use it because it represents a very specific set of tasks, etc.
Very good. So you're talking a lot about stuff, all of the artifacts that we have in our collection. And we've got a lot that's on display. How much of what's on display at Ashland actually belongs to the Clay family or to Henry Clay?
I would estimate that of the artifacts on exhibit in the house, at this point, we may be approaching 80% family stuff. We've been very fortunate over the course now of, 75 years since we opened, that we have been able, over that time, to acquire a lot of family stuff. And a lot of that is due to the family itself. They've been very generous in either lending or donating things to the museum, making it possible for us to exhibit that stuff. And that's really important. When you come here, it makes the experience infinitely more authentic than it would be if we only had, say, a handful of items that belong to Henry Clay or the Clay family. Yeah, you can get a sense of what it's like, but we can say this is the actual thing. And I when I do tours, I did a tour, did the 4 o'clock yesterday, and one of the things that goes through my mind quite often is how amazing it is that for almost all, a very high percentage of the things that we talk about, the stories that we tell. We're able to do that by pointing at the artifact that goes to that particular story. I mean, when we talk about dueling, I can point at Henry Clay's dueling pistols. You know, when I talk about Clay being gone from home, and when he is home, I can point at his bed. You know, we have so much of that. That's really a remarkable thing. That sets us apart from a lot of other institutions. We're very, very lucky in that regard.
Well, I can hear the enthusiasm in your voice about some of these pieces and what it means to be kind of standing in this authentic historic site. So I'm hoping you can tell us maybe a couple of your very favorite artifacts. I know this is a difficult question for you and something you get asked a lot. But are there any that really kind of speak to you?
There are several that do. We have a drawing of an enslaved African American by the name of Charles Dupuy, which we just acquired at the beginning of this year. And that one is a particular favorite, A, because it is so incredibly unique and so incredibly rare. You just don't find those. I mean, there are not very many authenticatable images of enslaved African Americans. It's certainly not of people that well known and with that level of provenance. We have every detail just about of that drawing, when it was made, where it was made, who did it, why they did it, what they did with it for a long period of time. You know, it turns up again about 100 years ago. So we have pretty much the complete story. That just doesn't happen. I mean, when you get something like that, that's remarkable. And that's for me was the culmination of a very long process. We worked on that for 20 years. And finally, after 20 years of it moving through a family and us keeping up with it and developing a relationship, the time was right for it to come here. And that, you don't get those very often. I've had a few since I've been here where we were able to acquire things either over a long period of time or that, you know, were really remarkable that we didn't know were there or that really changed our exhibition. Henry Clay's stock journal is another one that we knew it was out there. And that was amazing because when I acquired it, I promised the donor, the way I got him to donate it was to promise him we'd build a room around it, and we did. So we have this entire room that interprets Clay's legal and agricultural legacy, which is immense, that came around that one artifact. That was really amazing. There are other artifacts that either are just interesting to me personally or are really personal, like Clay's jacket. When I put that jacket up, I mean, that he wore that. I mean, that was on his body, and it was worn by others in the family, sometimes for better or worse. But that's a really intimate thing, and you don't get a lot closer to Henry Clay than that. So that is really amazing. On a strictly personal level, we have an artifact in the collection that I'm probably the only one that ever notices. It's not something we ever talk about. It doesn't even have a story, really. But in the nursery, we have a camel inkwell. And it was made about 1900 in England. If you want one, you can buy them on eBay. They pop up occasionally. Ours is pretty nice. It's in pretty good condition. The paint job is in pretty good shape. I collect camels. So for me, that's always been, when I do tours and things, I always like to check on the camel and look at the camel. But that's just something I'm probably the only person that ever even thinks about the camel.
That's so cool. Yeah, there's all these little personal artifacts that, I don't know, you just end up kind of having affection for one reason or another. The Ghent jacket, like Eric mentioned, that's a really cool one, and you can actually see it on our website. Eric, can you talk a little bit about how visitors, if they're interested in seeing something that's in our collection, how they might go about, and maybe they can't visit right away, how might they go about finding that on our website?
Sure. We have a database in which we manage our collection. So all the artifacts are entered into that with photographs, etc. That database is online. You can access a lot of that information. If you go to our website, go to the Learn tab. On the Learn tab, there is, I believe, a sub-tab for the collection and a sub-tab to that, which is for the collections catalog. And you can go to the catalog and you can search pretty much the entire collection. I have some things that, very few things that are still being cataloged that are relatively new, that may not be in there yet, but it gets updated periodically, and so they'll be there at some point. But you can look through the whole collection, see the photographs, the whole deal. And if you have specific questions within those records, you can find a link to email me, and I can provide more information, etc. we feature things from time to time. The Wake Up with Ashland series is all on Facebook, and I've been featuring artifacts in the collection pretty regularly since April, I guess. So there's that, and we'll keep doing that. We have a whole bunch more things a long time before we're going to run out of artifacts. So that will be there. So those are all out there, very open and accessible.
So our colleague Kate right now is taking questions on Facebook on the comment section. So I just noticed that we both posted the link to the online catalog. So if you're interested in searching, it also has a really cool feature where you can randomize your search. So maybe you don't know what you want to see, but you want to kind of go in there and just come across a really cool, weird artifact. You can do that by just hitting the randomize button. We do have a couple of questions. One is from Sue Andrew, who you've seen on Wake Up with Ashland if you've been watching regularly. You may have taken a tour with Sue. She is a board member, a curatorial assistant, and a docent at Ashland. So Sue wants to, asking Eric for you to tell us about the trunk where you discovered some symbols or images.
Yes.
It's kind of mysterious.
We have in our collection Henry Clay's traveling trunk. It's a leather trunk. It was a gift from a saddle shop in Louisville. Clay received a lot of gifts like that because he was a staunch proponent of the American economy, of business, and of American industry, and the ingenuity and talent of American craftspeople. So they sent him a lot of stuff, and this is one of those items. And it's a pretty nice looking piece regardless. I mean, it's a pretty fancy trunk. If you open it up on the inside, it's got these very fancy leather eagles around a pocket, and it's a very fancy piece. I was photographing it one day. I'm trying to remember why. I guess for the catalog. Just went down and started taking some pictures. And when I started looking at the trunk, I had some light and got very close to it. I could see that the outside of the trunk had been tooled with images. And in particular, in the center of the lid, I could see what appeared to be an image of Henry Clay. Well, these were very faint. Over time, red rot and whatnot had caused them to become almost indiscernible. So I got thinking about it, and I looked at my photographs, and I could sort of see some stuff, but I'm not a great photographer and don't have the kind of equipment that would allow for a much more thorough examination. So there's a lab at UK. I forget what Center for Virtualization is, I think, what it's called. The guy that runs that lab has become nationally known for recovering certain kinds of information, most notably scrolls from Pompeii. These scrolls were buried in volcanic ash and basically charred to the point of being very little more than ash. Well, what he did was take them and scan, like a spiral scan, and he was able to essentially digitally unfold the thing and read what was written on those scrolls. So they now know a lot more about what was in this library at Pompeii. So I contacted him and I said, I've got this trunk. I know there's something there, or was. I'd like to find out more about it. So he set me up with somebody over at the art department. They have a very specialized photographic lab with extremely high-end equipment. So we worked out an arrangement. I brought the trunk to them. They photographed it extensively, and we were able to recover all sorts of images from the outside of that trunk. Henry Clay, Lady Liberty, stars, all sorts of things. When it was new, it was incredibly ornate. I mean, it was an incredible piece of art. And that was a remarkable discovery. I mean, you don't often have cases where you have an artifact that's been on view for years, and suddenly you discover more to it than you thought was there. Those are the kind of things that you hope you have the opportunity to encounter. Those are really fun days when you can pull stuff like that out and find new things like that. So that's remarkable stuff.
That's really cool. And that's one of kind of the reasons we talk, or you have your series on Wake Up with Ashland that's called Artifact Adventures, because this whole process is really kind of an adventure. You don't know probably from day to day when you're dealing with artifacts what you may encounter. So That's pretty cool. One thing, about being a curator is it's a very creative job because you have to look at the collection that you have and curate a collection, and then interpret it for the public. So that's a really cool thing. But it's also a very technical job too. So you talked about a couple of terms that I wanted to see if you could share a little bit more about. One was provenance, and the other was red rot. So these are kind of two different, there's one that's about how to find an artifact and, make sure it's legitimate. And the other term is kind of more about conservation and preservation of the artifact. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about both.
Sure. The simpler term is red rot. That's a specific term relating to leather. Leather, of course, is natural tissue. It comes from living animals. And when it's removed from the animal, if nothing is done to it, it dries out over time. And the result is it becomes reddish and powderizes. There are ways you can treat it that will address that. It won't necessarily completely restore it. If, like on the trunk, I don't think it's ever going to be possible to completely restore the designs on the trunk because they're no longer there. I mean, they cease to exist essentially. But you can arrest it, and we've done that in a number of places. We have books that we've conserved, Henry Clay's law books, that had that condition, and by applying cream, there are compounds you can apply that essentially restore the moisture within the leather, which reverses the red rot. So that's what red rot is. If you have a lot of old books and you pull it off the shelf, and there's red powder laying on the shelf, you've got red rot. And it's very common. It happens in most leather if it's not used regularly. The other term, provenance, is a term used in the museum field that encompasses the informational component of stuff. So, if you have, an artifact like the trunk, if you didn't know anything else about it, you have a fairly nice looking trunk, but that's the end of it. It doesn't tell a greater story. If we know the story, however, that it was made by this company in Louisville, given to Henry Clay because of the support of American industry, there are stickers on it that indicate that the family not only kept it, but continued to actively use it as a trunk long after Clay died. So it was an important possession to them. I mean, they made a great effort to retain it and use it and whatnot. That's an important story. Now we can talk about things about it within the context of a tour. We know that it was given to him for this reason. We can talk about it in terms of his travels. We know that he traveled with it when he traveled from the time he received it until he died, I guess. And we know that his family used it. So that's what makes things important. One of the best examples of this is we have in the collection a check written by Henry Clay that sits on the dressing table in the dressing room, which, okay, it's signed by Henry Clay. That's, interesting enough. But when I acquired that check, I was able to find in the letters, the published letters of Henry Clay, the papers published by UK, the letter that Clay wrote that went with that check. That explained why he wrote it, which made it much, much more interesting. Clay wrote this check for $150 and sent it to a guy in Philadelphia. His son, Thomas, at that time was in Philly, and he was supposed to be studying law. And apparently, I guess, got unfocused and spent the money he was supposed to be spending on lodging, etc., on drink and whatnot, and had nothing left to pay his hotel bill. And eventually, the hotelier got tired of not being paid, so he had Thomas arrested and thrown in jail. So Clay bailed his son out, paid the hotel bill, bought some books and a coat, and paid for him to come back home where Clay could supervise. So it's a fascinating story, and it's a fun story. It's also important because if you read a lot of the books about Clay, they often insinuate that he was a terrible father, that he didn't pay attention. Well, that's not true at all. Obviously, he had a career, and so he was often away and whatnot, but he always cared, and he worked very hard to give his sons, all of his children really, opportunities to help them along, to try to provide them opportunities to have good lives of their own. Sometimes they made that challenging, but he was a very attentive father, and that check speaks to that. That's provenance, and the provenance makes the artifact.
That's really interesting, and I love hearing how some of these artifacts humanize the people we're talking about. They make them more relevant. They give you those little details about their background and their lives that you wouldn't know otherwise. So they're just kind of like a little glimpse into the past. I actually want to take a question from Julie Brock, who is a Clay descendant, She says, if memory serves, Ashland in the 1970s had a desk just inside the front door. So Ashland in the 70s had already been operating as a museum for about 20 years. It may have been staffed by the executive director, and a glossy brochure for visitors to proceed with their self-guided tour with fairly minimal information. It must have been a daunting and gradual process to curate this collection. Can you talk a little bit about that, Eric? The kind of historiography of Ashland?
Yeah. The desk she's referring to was the executive director's desk. If you come in the front door at Ashland, it sat to the right, kind of between the staircase and the wall. And the director sat at the desk. And she's right. When you would come in, you would go to the desk, pay your money, get your brochure, and the tour was largely self-guided. Now, from time to time, they had people who came in and did the tour. And it's interesting to look at some of those old tours because the oldest ones are basically just a one-page list. Item 1, painting of Henry Clay. Item 2, painting of George Washington, and so on. So there was no story. It was just, here are things. And, I guess they filled in to some degree with some information or some kind of story, but it represents a change in the way people view museums and the way museums approach their audiences. Back then, it was enough simply to be able to have stuff on display. Now, it's much more important to tell stories in a way that establish relevance, that are useful in terms of dealing not only with the world as it was, but as it is. So we have a different focus. And at that time, she was the only employee. Lorraine C. was hired in 1950. She worked here for 35 years, longest tenure of any employee at the estate. And she didn't have any particular museum background when she was hired. She learned as she went. And there are a lot of things that you might look at what she did and say, oh, that's certainly not at all the right procedure. But the fact of the matter is she worked very hard when people approached the museum with artifacts to try to work with them to figure out what it was and find a way to get it here. She did document things to some degree. And we wouldn't be what we are without her having done that. So the work she did was extremely important. She didn't comprehensively organize it. The first catalog of the whole collection was not done until 1988. And it was not intensely detailed, but at least they started making notes like this belonged to the family, or this belonged to Henry Clay, or we got it from this person. And they also numbered the artifacts. So in a museum, all of the artifacts are assigned unique numbers. Those numbers allow you to go into the catalog and find all the information about the artifacts. So that happened in 1988, after Mrs. C had gone on and retired. So, like I say, it was an interesting time. When you open as a museum, we had a lot of stuff because Nanette Bullock left most of what was here in the house to the museum. So that was here, but there were a lot of things we didn't have. We might have wanted rooms in a certain way, but didn't have all the stuff. So they built the collection that we now use to tell the stories that we tell. So no question, they did some very, very important work in doing that.
Very good. Well, thank you, Julie, for that question, by the way. I do wonder, as a curator, we're going to kind of close out the conversation, if there's any artifact or puzzle piece that's out there that you've found elusive, you haven't been able to find it yet, or track down, or some piece of the Henry Clay puzzle that could be solved by some artifact. Is there anything like that that's out there? Or that you hope?
Oh, yeah. There are definitely artifacts out there that are important artifacts that I would love to see here, or that, where are they? Some of them we know where they are, or, some of the story, some we don't know at all. Just recently, in the last couple of weeks, we've discovered that Henry Clay's daughter-in-law, Susan Jacob Clay, had a photograph made of Henry Clay's enslaved housekeeper cook, Charlotte Dupuy. By the time the photograph was made, she had been emancipated, but this photograph was made in 1855, and she's apparently holding two of Susan's children. We never had any idea that existed until a couple of weeks ago. And this points to a reality that this reminded us of, and I've been reminded of this a lot of times over the course of my time here, is that as much as we think we have found most stuff, there's always stuff out there. I mean, we don't know all of what's out there, but that's a piece that I'm looking for now, and I would love to find. I don't know exactly where it is. I have some ideas, but that's a piece that I've begun the search for. Was a painting, actually, there were two of them, done by a man named John Wesley Jarvis of Henry Clay while he was in New York City waiting to depart to go to Ghent to negotiate the Treaty of Ghent. I have a G clay of the original, but I don't know where the originals are. Um, I had thought I located one. I thought one of them maybe it may have belonged to the wife of Hollywood producer Dino De Laurentiis. Turns out that's not the case, and I know that because I called her assistant, and she held out the phone and yelled at Mrs. De Laurentiis, "Do you have this painting?" "No." "Okay." "Oh well." So that's a painting I would like to find. That's a painting from a time when there aren't a lot of paintings of Clay, and it was done at an important point in his life when he's doing something really remarkable. Henry Clay's son John gave Abraham Lincoln a snuff box, which I have searched for since 2007, something like that, when we started the Lincoln Bicentennial. I have been able to track it through. After Lincoln died, Mary gave it to a friend in New York. I know that. I don't know what happened after that. I have not been able to find it. So that's a piece that I think would be really interesting. That goes to some interesting stories. That's another one that I don't know where it went, what happened to it. There was a gold medal presented to Henry Clay by the citizens of California. I have a description of it. It's not mentioned anywhere in family documents, and that's really weird. I have to believe that would have been viewed as important. I don't know where that went. That would be a fun one to track down. Henry Clay's gold medal from the Golden Citizens. Henry Clay's gold medal from the citizens of the city of New York, the one that which contains his edited list of accomplishments, is a really incredible, not only work of art, but important piece and statement on Henry Clay's part as to what he did in his life. That sold at auction several years ago, and I don't know who now owns it. I would be interested in knowing that. That I always thought could be sort of a keystone piece for us if we ever acquired it. It would be complicated because it's such that it would be the physical aspects of curating that, of housing it, displaying it, would be really challenging. But so there are definitely things out there, and day to day, you never know. I've gotten phone calls, I've gotten emails. Guess I have this thing. Guess what I have? Where was that? The Lincoln book that we have, inscribed by Henry Clay to Abraham Lincoln. I had been working for several years to track down Lincoln artifacts for the bicentennial. That's not mentioned anywhere. And all of a sudden it pops up on eBay one day. So, you just never know. And that's what makes this job so much fun. If everything were known, if it were all there, what would I do? I mean, that would take out the thing that I do most and best. And that's the challenge, is to continue to look for these things because they continue to sculpt the story. Our story has changed so much over the years, and a lot of it is because we've acquired artifacts that either cause us to rethink it or make it possible for us to interpret it differently or whatever. But it has changed drastically over the years, even in the years I've been here, and that's the constant joy of it, to keep being able to make it better and more accurate and more interesting.
Well, Eric, I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much for sharing what you do here at Ashland, and thank you for what you do at Ashland. We are, a better place for the collections that you've brought in, for the exhibits and interpretation that you've provided while you've been here at Ashland. And I think that Eric kind of spoke to something that's really cool about the nature of history, and that it's not, closed. It hasn't been written. A definitive, history has not been written. Every time a new artifact is discovered, a new perspective is brought into the story, and we're able to interpret the history differently. And this is something that we can all be a part of. So we are always looking for people to bring in. Eric, like you said, talks to people all the time with artifacts that they have found that are related to Ashland in some way. Eric is very helpful for people who are working on their genealogy to think if you think you have a connection to the Clay family. Eric helps with that all the time. We're going to put his email address in the comments because if you have a question for him, he's always, happy to help. So Eric, thank you so much for enlightening us. And I guess we'll see you on Thursday of next week, right? For another week.
Okay, sounds good to me. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining. If you have questions, if you're watching this later throughout the day, feel free to add questions and we'll check back, and I'm sure Eric will answer. Thank you all. Thanks, Eric. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too. Take care.
Bye.